And joining us now on the Book Talk segment of the program today, great pleasure to welcome a man who's written a very interesting book about BP, the oil situation, the disaster a few years ago. Really went in depth on it. It's called Run to Failure, BP and the Making of the Deepwater Horizon Disaster. We're joined by Abrahm Lustgarden today. He's a reporter for ProPublica and covers primarily energy and environmental news, and he joined us today by telephone. Abrahm, good to have you on. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi there. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I had a chance to read through the book. Very fascinating book, and great job of detailing the story. I mean, we all know what happened with the oil spill. That was, of course, big down here in our part of Florida as well. But well, you really went back and dug through the archives somehow to get some of the backstory. That must have been kind of not only fun but challenging for you, right?
It was, absolutely. Everybody was looking at the spill itself and telling the story of what happened there, and I thought there was a more important story about accountability in this company, in BP, and it got me to look back about 20 years, tracing the history of how its executives make decisions around risk, how they've approached the environmental issues that the company faces, and how they have, in some cases, not kept a safe environment for their workers. So it's really a look back that long before the Gulf of Mexico spill, but kind of explaining how such a spill could happen.
Yeah, almost like a prequel, if you will, to the situation leading up to what happened. And now I know obviously it's difficult sometimes, getting through the dealing with executives. They don't always want to talk to you. Well, what was your process from day one to try and get some of that information?
Yeah, well, no one wanted to talk to me at BP, and they didn't up to the end. It was a very careful process of cultivating sources, just a patient, development of relationships over a couple months. There are a couple whistleblowers in the company who had been public about their complaints over the years, and I started with them. And you work through them and then to their lawyers, and then quietly to some of their colleagues, people who are still employed at BP, but for obvious reasons, don't want to have their names used, and just building up a sense of trust. That what I was interested in was telling a story about things that they cared very much about. And what ultimately happened is a lot of those people ended up sharing documents with me, and it's the documents that are the most powerful. You can't always verify a story that an individual tells you, but when the document comes with BP letterhead signed by an executive, and the words are clear as day, that's where there's real, hard reporting, and that's ultimately what I got, was thousands of pages of internal BP documents.
It's always amazing to me now, particularly if you go back to the Watergate years, there's still people that put information down, either now in email, I guess, mostly, but written down that can come back to get them in the end. You almost wonder why. I mean, good that they do.
Yeah.
It brings it to light, but you almost wonder, there's always something out there, isn't there?
Right, absolutely. And that's one of the amazing things about BP and this story to me is that they didn't see this as incriminating, and they weren't trying to hide it. They actually recognized how serious the problem was many, many years ago, and a lot of the documents are reflections of their efforts to address it. So they would bring in teams of lawyers, or they would bring in consultants to analyze, where they had gone wrong previously and give them suggestions about how to improve it. So the documents are explicit in that sense. But what's interesting is that each time, whether it's 2000 or 2003 or 2006, each time the company went through this process, it didn't really follow through on the recommendations, and it didn't make the improvements that were suggested. But the documents were their own effort to improve.
You talk in the book, speaking of that older documents, I think, 1999, a memo that I guess some of the field workers right out in Alaska or whatever they were, the oil drilling machinery was, and they sent a memo to the executives saying, I guess just from the notes, we're doing all we can, we're talking, are you listening? So that they knew even before the executives, I guess, or maybe they didn't, but the executives, they want to make sure the executives knew what was going on, right?
Right, absolutely, and that's a thread throughout every accident that BP's had. You have workers in the field whose lives are at risk, very serious situations where they work in a refinery, they work along a pipeline. Dozens of them have died, and they take their life in their hands to go to work every day. They are the ones that see that the field, in this case the Alaskan oil field, is declining and is in poor condition. But what happens time and time again is that employees express their concerns, and instead of that being a wake-up call to the company has punished them for saying something. Many of them have been fired. Many of them have been blacklisted and lost the right to work. That happened in Texas, in Alaska, even in the Gulf of Mexico. There's a whistleblower right now still fighting a case for being fired after raising issues on the Atlantis oil rig just before the Gulf of Mexico spill happened on the Macondo well.
Right.
So BP has not been receptive to hearing from its employees.
And then a lot of the book, you go into the history of John Brown, who was the CEO for, I guess, about 18 years, and great detail of his tenure there. I guess a fascinating figure in one sense, but when you realize what went on there, you almost wonder how that lasted 18 years. Huh?
Yeah, John Brown, his personality, his story is a lot of what drew me in. I mean, he's a fascinating character in that, he's brilliant. He's an amazing success story in terms of some aspects of corporate leadership, and he became famous in the business world for that reason. But my book really looks at the contradictions between his successes and what he became famous for, and the cost of getting there. And the cost was that he overlooked certain incredibly important things like operational management of what is a very industrial process that BP is engaged in. So John Brown was a brilliant leader, a brilliant manager in many ways, a brilliant financial wizard in terms of bringing a company, making a company successful in Wall Street, serving shareholders, making it profitable. But he overlooked things like maintenance, things like erosion inhibition on pipelines that would eventually leak. And he didn't care enough about them. And it's the complexities and the contradictions between what he did do and didn't do that I found so interesting, and the reason why much of the book is a profile about his leadership.
Yeah. And obviously you talk in the book about the oil spill of a couple of years ago, but you go back as well to 2005. That's another one, the explosion in Texas, right? That killed 15 workers. So it's not only the oil spill that we all know about in the Gulf, but that one as well. And that's what 300,000 gallons of oil. Well, actually, that was a year after that. Another spill in Alaska, right?
Yeah, they had a horrible run in 2005, 2006. First, they almost sunk the Thunder Horse drilling rig, which is a rig just up the Deepwater Horizon in the Gulf. A couple months later, a couple months before they had the explosion at the Texas City refinery.
Oh.
That was the worst industrial disaster at the time in U.S. history, and 15 workers died. And the documents there are explicit in terms of the BP's executive leadership contemplating what it would cost to fix equipment versus how many lives would be at risk if they didn't chose not to fix it and the explosion happened. And they were just dealing with that when a couple months later they had this 200+ thousand gallon oil spill in Alaska,
Prudhoe Bay.
Tundra,
Right.
in Prudhoe Bay, and that was because they didn't maintain pipelines. And again, the email record just shows that they explicitly debated what would happen if they paid X amount of money if they didn't maintain the pipelines, and there was a risk that they would spill if they didn't do that, and they chose to keep the money, and then the spill happened. It's just very clear.
And just watching, the television coverage of the PR attempt after the spill a couple of years ago, you almost wonder how that, what PR people were they using to do that. Some of those press conferences or interviews were pretty bad. Putting a spin on it, right? I mean, that was difficult to watch. I mean, obviously, the environment was getting damaged there, and it didn't seem like they were doing a lot. I know they were, but PR-wise, it was kind of shaky, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But what's most interesting, and again, sort of through this book, is if you were to watch those clips, go on the internet and look at them, and then you watch what they said in the news conferences as the Gulf of Mexico spill was unfolding, there's amazing similarities in the messaging and how they handle it. And there is this, to those who have paid attention to BP over the year, there is this kind of echo effect where you're kind of like, yeah, I think I've heard that before. Not so specific to the situation.
Well, what's the update as of today. Obviously, the spill has been clamped. We all know that. I still see billboards down here where I am in Sarasota, Abram. If you have a claim, you can still file it. I don't think there's that much damage in Sarasota, if any, but I guess that's still going on, right? The legal side?
Yeah, there's much more to go. Claims can still be filed. The government lawsuits, civil lawsuits against BP still are outstanding and have not been resolved, and there's still this ongoing criminal investigation. In March, the Department of Justice filed first charges against a low-level worker regarding whether they fraudulently represented the amount of oil spilling in the Gulf. Wall Street Journal is reporting, Huffington Post was reporting just today, more details on that the investigation is working its way up the ladder. They could actually be looking at some high-level former and present BP executives, holding them responsible, at least for starters, for lying about how much oil was spilling into the Gulf of Mexico. It's interesting, one of the central characters of that investigation, those publications are reporting, is a guy named Doug Suttles. Doug Suttles is a central character in my book. He used to be a chief executive of BP's operations in Alaska. Mm-hmm. He was there a lot of times where things went wrong up there, and I go into great depth about him and his leadership. Right around the end of that period, he was transferred down to the Gulf of Mexico. He became the point person, the spokesperson for the cleanup after the spill happened there.
Yeah. Well, it's a fascinating story. It's ongoing still. The name of the book is called Run to Failure, BP and the Making of the Deepwater Horizon Disaster. We've been talking with Abrahm Lustgarden today. Abrahm, people have do you have a website people get a hold of you or the book if they like?
Well, the book on Amazon, of course, and read more about my reporting on BP and in this project at ProPublica.org. And we've got a page set up for it and find a whole bunch of information there.
Great. Abram, appreciate you taking a few minutes. I know being a reporter, you're a busy guy, but thanks for joining us, and we'll look forward to talking to you again when your next project comes out.
Thank you so much for your interest. I really appreciate it.